Yo guys, it's JJ here, and today I'm going to be walking you through how to make a hard piano beat for the likes of Kodak Black himself. And I'm going to take it a bit back to the old school vibes. I'm talking about like 2017 kind of Kodak, maybe 2016 vibes. You know how I do it. But before we get into the video, make sure to like, comment, subscribe. We are on the way to 1,000 subs, so really pushing it this year. Highly appreciate all the support. And as well as that, down in the description below, you will find a link where I have a bunch of free drum kits for you guys, just from love, just to show some love from me back to you guys. But without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first thing I've done was make the melody, and for the first plugin we're using is of course Contact 7, and you can use any of your favorite keys for this, but I am using the Noir Bank on the pure preset. As well as that, as you guys can see from the pattern, we are doing this in the G minor at a BPM of 110, you know, as I said, old Kodak kind of vibes. So to start it off, from what you guys can see, the pattern is a very simple pattern, repeats itself every 2 bars. And without further ado, I'll walk you through it. So if we just focus in right here on these 2 bars, as you guys can see, it's essentially just a minor chord. As you can see, we're doing the G, the A sharp, and the D, just a simple triad. Then replaying the same notes again, however, we're taking this down 1 semitone, as you guys can see. And the good thing is, when you use notes that are 1 semitone apart, as in here and here, these are notes that are in tension, gives it a nice dark atmosphere, and of course that's what Kodak goes for, you know what I mean? So I use these notes, and I essentially just built it just by doing that. And then of course we ended off on a G, and then the pattern just repeats itself again for a full 8 bar. Then the last thing I actually did was click Control A, and then I clicked Alt R, to randomize the velocity of all my notes, you know, making it sound more human, giving it a bit of variation. So without further ado, this is what the melody sounds like. And there we have it. And the last thing you need to know about this melody is it's very repetitive, which is something that's really useful for when you make trap beats, because making things too complicated sometimes might just take it away from the artist and it might not sound good. So remember, keep it simple when we're doing these nice hard melodies on the keys, especially for people like Kodak. And now looking onto the effects itself, first off, I got myself an EQ, and I've just cut off pretty much all the lows and any kind of clicking sounds. And then I just ducked a few of the highs by using this little knob. And then next thing, I've got myself an instance of Valhalla Vintage Verb, and as you guys can see, I've cut off quite a few of the low hertz because I don't want the low end to be muddy from the reverb. And these are the presets I dedicated towards it. And the use of this reverb, to be honest, is just to create some ambience, get a nice little setting going. And then finally, I stereo separated at 22% just to give it a bit of width and stereo separation. And now the next thing we have in the melody is an instance of Omnisphere, and the preset I am using is the Choir Woman Rs-F, and this can be found in the Humans Voices bank. So when we're looking at the pattern, it's kind of like a counter melody, but it just really complements that original melody. As I've just done before, it's a simple minor chord repeating itself over and over. And then over here for a bit of a switch up, you know, we're going from a D to a D sharp, returning back down to the simple minors, and then, you know, taking away this note up here, so it's not even a chord no more, going down to the A sharp, again back to the D, into the A sharp, and then into the A, and I had this repeat again over a full 8 bar, so 2 lots of 4, making an 8. And before I play the melody, one thing you need to remember, of course, is clicking Control A, highlighting the whole thing, then clicking Alt R to randomize your velocities to, again, just make it sound a bit more human and natural. And now, without further ado, this is what the melody sounds like. And there we have it. Now for effects, I kept it simple again, got an EQ cutting off all the loads and just ducked a frequency I wasn't a fan of. And of course we got ourselves the instance of Valhalla Vintage Verb yet again. Not too much reverb, not going really crazy with it, but I'm using this choir kind of like a nice little texture background, kind of complements the whole dark atmosphere. And last but not least, I stereo separated the melody because I didn't want it to be like, you know, too cluttered in the forefront, so stereo separating it helped lay back the choir. And of course I did this at 38%. And now we got ourselves the bass pattern, of course, and the way I did this was using a preset called the Growler Moog bass, one of my favorite basses. Of course you can find this in the synth bass bank, and it's from the VST Omnisphere, of course. And as you guys can see, I didn't actually just follow the root note, I can make my own bass line to give it a nice little dark vibe, again giving it that Kodak feel. So I kind of just got myself these little notes here. Apart from the root note, as you can see, the rest of them are part of that intention part of the scale where notes are 1 semitone apart, and it gave it a nice little dark vibe. And then to give a bit of variation, towards the end of the 8 bar, I switched to going from an A sharp down to the A, you know, because a bit of variation can make that nice little difference. And as well as that, for this bass, I really added no effects. I just kept it simple and stock because I thought it sounded really good. But without further ado, this is what the bass sounds like. And there we have it. And next up, we got the instance of Expand 2. What I did was use a lead preset, and this is the whiner from the soft leads bank. And as you guys can see, this is essentially just the bass pattern I was just played, but I added a bit of a switch just by doing this instead of keeping it at a simple A. And it's quite simple and straightforward. Just copy and pasted the pattern over, a nice little layer, but of course at a much higher octave than the bass. And without further ado, this is what the lead sounds like. And there y'all have it. As you can see, it kind of complements the bass very much nicely, and as well as that, fitting that whole Kodak vibe. Nice, slow and hard, of course. So now time to show you the effects I had on this lead. And yet again, we have got ourselves another EQ, because that's how we do it, cutting off all them lows, ducking the frequency I wasn't a fan of. And next up, of course, Valhalla Vintage Verb, cutting off all the lows, as you can see. And this is the preset I used, a bit heavier on the reverb because I wanted to really kind of like blend this into the back with the lead, giving it a bit of like a distant feel, if you know what I'm saying. And then as you guys can see, I didn't stereo separate the sound at all, keeping it in the forefront of the mix. However, with the ambience of the Valhalla Vintage Verb, kind of makes it sound like it's a bit further back. And now, last but not least, for the melodic component, I've got myself an instance of Expand 2 yet again. And the preset I am using is the big strings. And of course, it's from the strings bank, as you guys can see. Now, for the pattern itself, it's very simple. And to explain this, to be honest, I kind of use this as like a riser and a crash within the beat, because it's just a nice little jab and a nice little like roll towards the end of every 4 and 8 bar. And of course, as you guys can see from the pattern, it's a very much at the low octave. We got ourselves a G stab, then a nice little roll into another G stab, and then again another roll. And now for the effects itself, I've cut off all the lows on this because I really want the bass to stay low in the lows, so didn't want it to have to clash with a low end. And then last but not least, I added a very heavy amount of reverb, as you guys can see, because this is kind of, as I just said, a rise or a crash kind of effect. But it sounds really good in the overall beat. And then last but not least, I stereo separated the sound 100%, so you could really hear how grand it sounds in the headphones. And again, just makes it harder for Kodak Black, because when he hears this kind of stuff, it really pops off. And then the last thing I did was I rendered out the melody. I took it down 2 semitones, so now we went from a G minor all the way down to an F minor. And this is what the final melody sounds like. And there you'll have it. As you can see, super dope, super dark, nice keys. Kodak Black can hop on this. But now, without further ado, let's just go straight into the drums. So, starting off with the clap, very simple and straightforward, as you guys can see. Simple pattern, everyone knows it. And now for the hi-hats. So, as you can see, I got myself a nice little hi-hat pattern here. Repeats every 4 bar, because that's just how I like to make my hi-hats. And let me just walk you through it. First thing you'll need to know is I went onto the magnet tool, went onto half step, as you can see, clicked it, and then went up to this paintbrush tool and click the original paintbrush. And if you look over here, all I just did was click and then drag these notes in, of course, but just add this pitch, not up here. And then over here, I just had like a normal roll, so I just added a note, another note, and another note, rather than just holding and dragging, or else it would have been the opposite of what I wanted. Then I added another like half step roll, another half step roll, and another normal roll. Then I just copy and pasted it to make it a full 8 bar. But something else I like to point out about my hi-hats, and this goes to most of them, I'd say, when I'm making nice and simple ones, as you guys can see, this hi-hat, for example, same with this one, just with those 3 hi-hats, for example, when these rolls come in, they come in at the same time as like the kick, or maybe if I had the 808, it'd come in with the 808. It just makes it sound a bit nicer and a bit more punchier, so that's a little tip from me to you. And without further ado, this is what it sounds like. And without further ado, this is what the clap and hi-hat sound like. And there you'll have it. As you guys can hear, the hi-hat sound really nice, just simple, two-step with a few rolls, and that's the kind of shit that Kodak likes. And that's the kind of stuff that Kodak likes. And now for the final pattern of the beat, and yes, this is literally the final drum pattern. We got ourselves the kick. I didn't add an 808 because I felt like the bass really did a lot, and the way I structured the beat, which I'll show you next, really complements the way I've got this beat going. But as you guys can see, very simple kick pattern, but obviously I'll walk you through it. First things first, we got ourselves a nice little standard kick pattern going here. Added these notes over here and here. Then I got myself a nice little back-to-back kick, you know, for a little bit of a punch. Then, you know, simple pattern again for the kick. However, for the second half of the 8 bar, for a bit of variation, all I did was just add another kick right here. You know, very simple. You don't always have to do crazy stuff for variation. Just one note can make the difference. And that's all I did. And then another important thing I did for my kicks, and this goes for 808s as well. I clicked Control A, and then using the scroller wheel on my mouse, I rolled it all the way to the top. And then using my scroller wheel on my mouse, as you guys can see, I just maxed out my velocities by rolling it all the way to the top. And that's very important for your kicks and 808s because, firstly, it makes them sound punchier and harder. Second of all, it sounds better for producers and artists alike. And last of all, you're making a hip-hop beat. I mean, if your 808s and your kicks ain't hitting, then what's the point? So, really advise you do this, and it just makes it sound overall much better. So, without further ado, this is what the full beat for Kodak sounds like. And there you'll have it. But before I wrap this video up, let me just walk you guys through the structure of the beat. So as you guys can see, this is the pattern, and to be honest with you, it's a bit different from the usual. The first thing you need to note, we got ourselves the intro, got myself the keys playing, got myself all of the drums in, and of course the producer tag. Then we got ourselves the chorus itself, we've got ourselves the keys playing, the bass is introduced, we've got the drums playing again. And then for the second half of the chorus, I introduced the lead, of course, but then to go into the verse, I just had this nice little thing that I had, as I said, the riser from the strings. And now when looking at the verse itself, it's 3 8 bars, making it a total of 24 bars. So if we focus on the first part of the verse, as you guys can see, I got myself the nice little strings that I use as a rise and a crash, got myself the piano pattern. Then of course I introduced a new element, which is the choir, as well as that I removed the hi-hat pattern just to give it a nice little breakdown vibe. Then a thing I did as well here, as you guys can see, I added this gross beat effect. It's kind of like a vinyl stop, but a very quick one. So I have it playing before the introduction of this verse here. So I had it playing before the introduction of this second part of the verse over here. And speaking of the second part, when this comes in, as you guys can see, I removed the choir yet again, reintroduced the bass and the lead and the hats. And of course I have this nice little riser at the beginning. But to demonstrate how the effect of this gross beat works, I'm gonna just play it for you guys right now. And there you'll have it. As you can see, it's a nice quick little vinyl stop. Introduce the bass and a new component, which is the lead again, and the hats, making it sound super dope, and it just gives a bit of variation to the beat, because sometimes it's not all about adding and removing instruments, it's more about the effects that you have on as well. So yeah, tip from me to you yet again. And now onto the final part of the verse section, which is what I like to call the pre-hook, because you know, it's the 8 bar before the hook, it leads up to it, so you know, it's kind of in the name. So as you guys can see, choir's reintroduced, of course, brought back the riser again, which was the strings, bring the bass and the hats halfway through once I have this nice little vinyl stop, so it really just adds a nice little bit of tension, a nice little effect to it again. And now looking back into the chorus, considering it's the final chorus, as you guys can see here, I got myself the choir playing alongside the keys and the bass, reintroduce the hats halfway through, and then at the end I literally have all of them, all of the components, and literally all the drums playing. And as you guys can see, it's a total of 2 choruses, 1 verse, and an 8 bar intro. So it's a relatively short beat, but then again, hey, I can do what I want, it's my beat.